Hello, everybody. This is Di, antinatalist, and I just had a few thoughts today, and there's just so much ridiculousness regarding COVID, and businesses are doing really, really poorly. They're not getting customers. Some places have extremely limited hours. They're, giving their staff reduced hours, which means reduced income. Our country is probably just destined for a terrible economic downfall. But my country is foolish regarding COVID and universal protection of its citizens when there's a pandemic or, a really an urgent situation. We're terribly unprepared, as we found out with 9/11, in defending our country. But the president of the U.S., he got COVID, and now the governor of my state tested positive for COVID. And Mexico took temperatures of everybody before they entered the airport, and before they entered the country, and before they entered businesses, every businesses. There was floor disinfectants that were used, and believe it or not, pesos were washed in a sanitizing solution and dried before handing back to you. In my country, people are bringing their children out to stores like Target and the grocery store. They're not staying home with their children. They're not leaving the children home with like a mother or a father or a grandmother or a relative. No, they're just bringing them out in public, and they're not even wearing masks. And there's no enforcement whatsoever. And there was very stringent enforcement in Mexico. They had security or even police officers who would approach an individual if they were not wearing a mask. And there was mandatory mask wearing in public in Mexico, and not the case here. Not the case at all. The only place in America that I saw the mandatory mask wearing was in Aspen, a very upscale town, a ski town, and they really wanted to protect their environment and, the tourist industry, just like Mexico. Just today, like I saw on TV, the media is fear-mongering, and there's plenty of misinformation, and we have quarantines, and we had COVID testings, but we don't have enforcement of daily mask wearing in public, and children seem to be exempt, which is a big flaw. Whenever you see babies, toddlers, and small children not wearing masks or with their mask down around their chin, like down here, and their mouth and their nose are exposed, that's not doing any good, folks. That's complete failure. And the parents of those children, they feel entitled. Nothing more than entitled. And they use the excuse of, my son, he can't keep a mask on, or, my daughter, she's under the age of 2, so she doesn't have to wear a mask. Well, I got news for you. Your little Susie or your little Johnny may be, the most precious thing in your world, but they spread viruses, and they can catch viruses. And there is no reason to bring any individual out into the public who's not wearing a mask. You don't need to go to Target to shop for Christmas ornaments or, the latest cookie or the latest cereal with your toddler or your baby. They don't belong there if they're not masked up. And it's just forever, it's just, it just goes over my head how parents can think that they are exempt, or that they should even place their child into potential danger. And even though children may not be getting, COVID at the rate that older people are getting it, it's just wrong to place a germ spreader in public, because they can affect other people, including the vulnerable population of those 60 and over. It's just nothing but self-righteousness for a parent to bring the little boy, the little girl, or, the infant out in public when they spread viruses and germs and bacteria, and they cough and they sneeze. And minors are more capable of spreading germs because they are not careful where they sneeze or what they touch, or refraining from coughing on like another human being, and their fingers are always in their mouth, and they're always spreading those fingers onto surfaces. It is just, it just makes me livid at the privilege that breeders, pronatalists have in this society. And, you should be restricted. Every single person should be restricted from going out in public if you're not masked. You can order food out. You can eat in. You can have your food delivered. You can make food at home. Anything. Order a pizza. Have some frozen foods delivered from Safeway or Albertsons or Giant Eagle. But don't take your family to the store. Every store recommends that you leave family members at home. You only bring the necessary family members to gather the food. And families are not doing that. Parents are not doing that. They're just going out about their business as if nobody matters but themselves. And this is a public health crisis. And they're not following any kind of guidelines or any kind of rules. All the energy is spent procuring more pronatalist living, which means that people are destined to catch and spread disease, suffer, and die. Nobody should have been born since the 1950s. And even earlier, there's been adequate birth control. There has always been abstinence. There's always been masturbation. So prevention is far better than any cure. If one generation would have just forgone their ability to reproduce, we would not have had continued suffering. And all it takes is for one generation to restrict births and prevent births and, chalk procreation up to major and significant harm. There has been no energy spent in encouraging people to limit families or to prevent children from being born. There's just no emphasis on contraception and greatly limiting the number of each family, the fertility of each family. And although I'm a proponent of voluntary human extinction, because that's the only way we're going to eliminate suffering in our world, I think we're long past restricting population. At this point, there needs to be a complete ceasing of reproduction. And I mean, maybe if 30 years ago, there was a global effort in limiting numbers in a family, and maybe imposing like a maximum of one or two children, and just to warm people up to the idea that the climate, the environment's being affected, and then after all, when you do have more children, you are imposing harm on them, great amounts of harm. And I really think we need some really strong incentives to encourage people to limit the number in their families. And I don't believe we should be giving tax deductions to any person who procreates. Biological reproduction is wrong. It is selfish. It is not altruistic, and it's not progressive. We're not getting anywhere by reproducing our species. There should be no tax incentives, no tax exemptions, no stimulus checks for families. Just like China, they should forego resources and government aid and even health care if they want to breed. And if you want to breed, you could either save up money, or you can borrow money, or you can ask your family. But the time is such where the world should not be paying for a biological parent's urge to reproduce. Nobody should support that urge to reproduce. I don't feel responsible for anybody's child. And I don't want my government paying for, taking care of children that somebody else decides to bring into the world. And there's always going to be sick children, crippled children, children with cancer, children with genetic diseases. And our community and socially, we are taking on that responsibility, and we are enabling the breeder mentality and pronatalism. And pronatalism just disgusts me. If I went out and bought a car and I couldn't afford the insurance or the car payments or the gasoline for that car, and I asked society to cover my ass, wouldn't that be irresponsible? I think so. So for someone to have children and expect for society to pay for their public schooling, their busing, mental health care, food, clothing, rent, school supplies, whatever. It's just so wrong. It's just, it's just absolutely greedy. The breeders have their hands out constantly for, donations, for money, for tax credits, for governmental assistance, and nobody owes you anything. And parents aren't doing their job. And when they reproduce, they're on their own. That's the way I want society to be orchestrated. When you decide to breed, you're on your own. But if you are a child-free person, or if you adopted or if you foster, that is another way that you can, use your parenting skills, or use your desire to nurture someone. You should be exempt. You should actually get privilege for being child-free, or for being a parent of an adopted or a foster child. Those are the elite people in society, the child-free, and those who choose to adopt a child who is already placed into existence and who has needs, not the parent who creates more needs and who creates more disease and more suffering. They should be penalized. So anyway, stay safe, everybody, and don't reproduce.